Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's quick review for Dopesick. This video is a part of a series of videos where I give a spoiler-free review of a show currently airing, or a show that has just aired in this case. In this video I will talk about the Hulu show Dopesick, which is a limited series. And what it means by limited series is that it's an 8-episode season and that's it. Like, there's going to be no more episodes, no more seasons. It's just meant to be one season of 8 episodes, and it tells a complete story in those 8 episodes. So Dopesick tells the story of the opioid epidemic, mainly focusing on the late 90s and early 2000s. It follows multiple storylines through the story in order to give the viewer a maximum overview of the epidemic and all the different levels involved. Now, one thing that I feel like might be criticized the most from the show is its non-linear storytelling. Now, this is something I've found in a lot of movies and films and shows that I like do non-linear storytelling, and I think if non-linear storytelling is done correctly, I love it more. Like, I think it's a very effective form of storytelling. Now, there are some examples where I think it's used poorly and it's unnecessary and it distracts from the story. Orange is the New Black is an example, is one I'm thinking of. In Star Wars: The Clone Wars did that. It aired some of their episodes out of order in season 3, and that I thought was really annoying and confusing. But I think if nonlinear storytelling done correctly, it can be really good. And I think there is a lot of certain critics and viewership who are just very resistant to this form of storytelling, regardless if it's done correctly, such as the movie Dunkirk, which I think was an amazing, used nonlinear storytelling in an amazing fashion. However, I saw a lot of critics criticizing it for it and saying it was unnecessary, something that I completely disagree with. So I kind of suspected that the critics would have that same reaction to Dopesick, even though I thought it used nonlinear storytelling in absolutely amazing and ingenious fashion. But thankfully there didn't seem to be that many critics. There were a few, and there were a few user reviews that I saw that also complained about this and said it made the show more confusing, which I completely disagree with. I think the nonlinear storytelling in Dopesick was actually extremely easy to follow and actually enhanced the story, because for one thing, they put a number of the year. They had a subtitle at the bottom of the screen that showed you what year they were in every time they switched years, so you always knew which year you were in. And I think the way that they combine these different storylines together that are taking place in different time periods, and yet they're kind of just telling the same story, is a very ingenious form of writing. It reminds me of the Christopher Nolan movie Memento, where all that is nonlinear and it takes place completely out of order. However, Christopher Nolan described that as being in the only order it could be in, because it's in the order that tells the story, which I believe is the same with Dopesick. So, Dopesick has multiple storylines. You have 4 storylines that all take place in the same time period that begin in 1996 and go up to 2002. You have a storyline with the small town country doctor played by Michael Keaton, who does an amazing job, of course, who is first sold Oxycontin, and he doesn't see anything wrong with it, so prescribes it to his patient. There is one of his patients, Betsy, who we follow, who's a minor, not that she's underage, but she works in a mine, and she gets a severe injury, so she has to take these opioids, which the doctor prescribes, and how that affects her life going forward. And we also have the salesman who works for Purdue Pharma, who sold the doctor this medicine, how he is kind of just going along with what his company is telling him. His company is saying that the pill's fine, non-addictive, so he's selling that and believing that, and it goes through his journey. And there's also the storyline with Richard Sackler and the whole Sackler family. The Sacklers are the mega billionaires who run Purdue Pharma, who first created Oxycontin. It shows their motivation, how they're trying to sell, and how they're trying to get around around all these obstacles to just try to sell as much and make as much money as possible. Then you get another storyline that begins in 1999 and goes up to 2002 with a DEA agent who becomes the head of a department that's looking into Purdue Pharma, and she gets really obsessed with trying to take them down, and is played by that agent is played by Rosario Dawson, who, again, amazing actress, does an amazing job. And then you have the other storyline, which involves two district attorneys, two lawyers in Virginia who try to go after Purdue and prove that they are causing this epidemic and that they should be held accountable for it. And this storyline begins in 2002 and goes up to 2007. And all of these storylines, of course, are all intercut between each other, and they all start in the first episode. And I actually love the way that works. I think it would have cheapened the story if we saw all of the 1996 stuff first and then started going into the 1999 stuff and then started going into the 2002 stuff. I think having it cut back and forth, and the way that they do it, they don't give, really, for the most part, they don't give anything away. It all, each episode has its own theme, and these stories work so perfectly in conjunction and tangent with each other that I think it's impressive and genius storytelling, and I think it really, really enhances the story. Had they tried to tell it in a straightforward linear story, I don't think it would have been as good as this. I think it would have really cheapened the story. So this is part of the reason why I love the show so much, is because I think it is an ingenious way to tell this story. And of course, it is a very important story to be told because it is based off of real life events. Now, most of these characters are fictionalized. They are amalgamations of several different real life people, such as the country doctor and the miner who gets injured and gets addicted to Oxycontin. These are not based off of any specific individuals, but are a lot of accounts from real life people. So it's trying to stay true to real life. The Sacklers, of course, are based off of real life people, but of course no one knows what the Sacklers were actually talking about and what their personal interactions were, so all that is highly fictionalized, of course, but they did base it off of things that the Sackler family and Purdue Pharma actually did and were actually trying to do, particularly with the salesman storyline. It's not based off any real life salesman, but they did take a lot of real life stuff from seminars and training videos and stuff that they did to portray that in a sort of realistic fashion. So it's a very powerful story, but they do fictionalize it in order to really get this across. And in that way, I actually think that this is one of the most powerful, most effective ways to get the audience involved in the story and to really get across the message of just how damaging and how particularly effective and significant this opioid epidemic was. And I think even more so than some documentaries, and there's been documentaries and other stuff about this, but because it gets you to see all the different facets of it, it gets you to see the Sacklers who are trying to sell it, it gets you to see the salesmen, the doctors who are prescribing it, the patients who become addicted to it, the attorney storyline, I think, is what really holds this show all together, because it really ties all these different storylines and all these different viewpoints together. Because with the such as the storyline with the country doctor and the patient who gets addicted to it, it's a really personalized story, which I think is very important to get that personal aspect of it. But the DEA storyline with the Rosario Dawson is much better at getting across the wider scope of how it's affecting hundreds of thousands of people throughout the country, and just how the large scope of just how dangerous it is. And I think the storyline with the attorneys ties all that together. It ties together the Sacklers investigating all the wrongdoing and corruption that is within the U.S. government that allowed the Sacklers to flourish, by the way. And it ties that together with the personal stories as well as the overall scope of how damaging it is. So I think it is a beautiful, brilliant form of storytelling to really get across a crisis. And in that way, it reminds me a lot of the movie Traffic, which has always been one of my favorite movies, because that's another way to look at a drug problem, and it tells you all the different, it had multiple storylines with different facets to try to look at it, and from multiple ways to give you a larger scope and idea of the story of the event that happened. But however, I think that the show is actually better than Traffic because it's longer, so it can go more in depth, but also I think it focuses on sort of more aspects of it, and I think the use of non-linear storytelling actually helps a lot, because you can see the different things that happened throughout time that contributed to this epidemic and how it affected people. So overall, I just think the show's brilliant. It contains amazing acting. Of course, you got Michael Keaton heading up the cast, and you have brilliant editing. As I said, the way it was written, edited together is something that's super impressive. Great music. So it is an achievement, in my opinion. So my rating for Dopesick out of 10 is going to be a 10. The best. I think the show is an achievement, and it's a huge recommend from me. I highly recommend that anyone watch this show. If it was a movie, it would be one of my favorite movies of all time, so I'm definitely going to consider it one of my favorite shows of all time. It's definitely one of my favorite limited series of all time, up there with series like Maniac and whatnot. But I do think the show probably isn't getting as much attention as it deserves, because I think this, I think is absolutely brilliant. So that's it for my quick review of Dopesick. Be sure to check out my channel as I cover many other shows like all things Star Trek, including Star Trek Prodigy and Star Trek Discovery, as well as other shows like The Expanse, Star Wars, The Clone Wars, and more. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all that. And thanks a lot for watching.